June 6th, 1944, 2:31 in the morning. The English Channel breathes slowly beneath a low sky, black water folding over itself in long, patient waves. Somewhere above that darkness, engines hum. Not loud, not hurried, just steady. A sound that feels almost polite. Hundreds of Allied aircraft move through the night like shadows with wings, their navigation lights dark, their crews silent. Inside, one of those planes sits Flight Lieutenant James Calder, hands wrapped tight around a canvas strap. He has been flying for years now, but tonight feels different. Tonight, the air seems heavier, like it knows what's coming. Below him, France is asleep. Across the Channel, in Germany and occupied Europe, clocks tick on desks where men believe they already understand the war's next move. They are wrong. Hours earlier, just after midnight, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt lay awake in his headquarters near Paris. The old soldier had learned to trust instinct more than reports, and his instinct was uneasy. Weather maps lay scattered across his desk. The seas were rough, the clouds were low, conditions no commander would choose for an invasion, and yet something felt off. He reached for the phone. In Berlin, Adolf Hitler slept. That mattered more than any radar return. For months, German intelligence officers had watched the Allies perform what looked like a clumsy, transparent act. Inflatable tanks appeared in southern England. Fake camps sprang up overnight. Radio traffic crackled endlessly, talking about divisions that did not exist. To many German analysts, it felt exaggerated, almost insulting. Pas-de-Calais had always been the obvious target. It was the shortest crossing, the most direct path, the place any rational commander would choose, and the Allies seemed eager to remind them of that fact. So eager, in fact, that some officers began to scoff. Psychological warfare, one Abwehr officer muttered weeks earlier, pushing aside another intercepted transmission. Noise meant to keep us staring at the wrong horizon. The irony was thick enough to taste. In Normandy, along the coast, a young German corporal named Ernst Keller smoked his last cigarette of the night. The wind off the sea cut through his greatcoat. He had been stationed here for months, staring at grey water and empty beaches. Nothing ever happened in Normandy. The real danger, everyone said, was further north. Calais, always Calais. Even Rommel, the desert fox himself, had split his attention. He wanted defenses everywhere, but resources were thin and decisions had been made. Normandy would wait. Keller flicked his cigarette into the sand and pulled his collar tighter. Somewhere inland, a church bell chimed the half hour, 2:30. Back in the air, Calder felt the aircraft dip. The pilot raised a clenched fist. 2 minutes. Below them, the fields of Normandy were quiet. No flak yet, no searchlights, just darkness and hedgerows and farmhouses tucked into sleep. Calder checked the small metal container at his feet. Inside were strips of foil. Window, they called it, cut to precise lengths. He would throw them out in timed bursts, creating ghost armies on German radar screens. Fake drops, fake landings, a fake invasion. One more layer in a lie that had been building for months. In Berlin, the first reports began to arrive. Radar contacts, unusual movement, air activity over the Channel. An aide hesitated outside Hitler's bedroom. He had been warned before. False alarms were becoming routine. Every spike on a screen seemed to lead nowhere. This one, though, felt bigger. Still, the order stood. Do not wake the Führer. Along the Normandy coast, the sky suddenly filled with sound. Engines, hundreds of them. Keller looked up as parachutes bloomed like pale flowers against the night. Men were dropping everywhere. Fields, roads, rivers. This was no raid, this was war. Phones rang frantically up the chain of command. Reports flooded in, airborne troops, gliders, fighting inland. And yet, even as the alarm spread, doubt followed close behind. Is this the real thing, or is this the bluff everyone has been expecting? At Pas-de-Calais, German units stood ready. Tanks fueled. Crews on alert. They waited for the blow they believed would come. And they kept waiting. The deception had done its work too well. Normandy burned and bled in the dark while Germany's strongest formations remained frozen in place, staring across narrow water toward an invasion that did not exist. As dawn crept closer, history balanced on a thin edge. The bluff was still holding, but not for long. The first gunfire in Normandy sounded like distant thunder, rolling inland and then fading. It was 3:45 in the morning now. Smoke hung low over fields where parachutes lay tangled in hedgerows, white silk caught on branches like torn clouds. Corporal Ernst Keller ran, not toward the beach, away from it. Orders were unclear. Communications were breaking apart. Reports contradicted each other by the minute. Airborne troops here, saboteurs there. A bridge blown somewhere west of Caen, or east. No one seemed sure. Keller reached a shallow ditch and dropped beside 2 other men. Their breaths came fast. Somewhere ahead, a machine gun opened up, sharp and sudden. Tracer fire cut lines through the dark. This feels wrong, one of the men said. Keller didn't answer. He was thinking the same thing. Across the channel, the deception continued to speak in its calm, convincing voice. Radar operators in northern France watched their screens fill with returns. Blips multiplied. Formations formed and reformed. It looked like the buildup for something massive, something aimed straight at Pas-de-Calais. In a command post near Calais, General Hans von Salmuth leaned over a map table, fingers pressed flat against the coastline. His staff watched him carefully. He had seen invasions before. He knew what preparation looked like. This, he said quietly, tapping the map, is the main effort. Normandy? That was chaos, raids, diversions, airborne harassment. Dangerous, yes, but not decisive. The real hammer had not fallen yet. In Berlin, the night was unraveling into confusion. Telephones rang unanswered. Couriers rushed through corridors carrying folders stamped with urgency. Conflicting reports piled up on desks faster than anyone could read them. At 4:15, Adolf Hitler was finally awakened. The message was brief. Enemy landings reported in Normandy. Airborne operations confirmed. Hitler listened, silent, eyes still heavy with sleep. Then he spoke. Diversion, he said. The word settled into the room like a verdict. He had been convinced for months that the Allies would strike at Calais. That belief had been carefully reinforced by Operation Fortitude, a deception so thorough it felt like truth. Normandy, in his mind, was noise. The Panzer divisions stayed where they were. On the beaches, the noise turned into something else entirely. At Omaha, the first landing craft slammed into obstacles. Ramps dropped. Men poured out into waist-deep water under fire that ripped the surface into white spray. Sergeant Daniel Reeves hit the sand hard, lungs burning, heart hammering so loud it drowned out everything else. He crawled forward, fingers digging into wet shingle, the smell of cordite and salt filling his nose. Behind him, the sea was choking with wreckage. This was not a raid. This was survival. And still, far to the north, armored units waited. Engines idled. Crews slept beside their tanks. Orders never came. German commanders hesitated, bound by a command structure that demanded certainty before movement. If Normandy was a diversion, and everything suggested it was, then committing reserves too early would be a disaster. Better to wait. Better to be sure. By mid-morning, the reports grew harder to dismiss. Beachheads were holding, not everywhere, not cleanly, but they were holding. Still, doubt clung on. Hitler refused to release the armored reserve without absolute confirmation. He feared exactly what the Allies wanted him to fear, that Normandy was bait, and Calais the true objective waiting just over the horizon. In that hesitation, minutes slipped away. Then, hours. On the ground in Normandy, those hours were paid for in blood. Corporal Keller crouched behind a stone wall, firing at shapes moving through smoke. The enemy kept coming. Not recklessly, methodically. This was not the behavior of a diversionary force. He felt it in his gut now, but feelings did not move divisions. Maps did, orders did, and those were still pointing north. As the sun climbed higher, the lie held firm. Germany waited for an invasion that was never coming, and the real one dug itself deeper into French soil. By noon, the sea off Normandy had turned gray-green, churned by thousands of holes moving back and forth like insects along a wound. Smoke drifted inland, clinging to hedgerows and villages, turning the summer air sour. On a ridge overlooking the coast, Lieutenant Karl Weiss studied the beach through binoculars. What he saw unsettled him. This was no fleeting strike. Engineers were already clearing obstacles. Vehicles were coming ashore. Supplies followed men, and more men followed supplies. That was not how a diversion behaved. Weiss lowered the binoculars and looked at his radio operator. Any word from Corps? The operator shook his head. Still nothing, Herr Leutnant. Orders are to hold. Hold. The word felt heavy. Far from Normandy, in a concrete bunker near Pas-de-Calais, the German 15th Army sat at full readiness. Maps were clean. Units were intact. Tanks waited under camouflaged nets, their crews checking watches, drinking coffee, listening for engines that never came. General von Salmuth paced. Every instinct told him this was the decisive front. The Allies would not cross at Normandy, not with the weather, not with the distance. Calais was the prize, always had been, and the evidence supported it. Radio traffic continued. Phantom divisions spoke endlessly across the airwaves. Reports described troop movements in England that never stopped. The storm was building, just not where men were dying. In Normandy, Sergeant Daniel Reeves found himself pinned behind a steel obstacle that jutted from the sand like a broken rib. He had lost track of time, lost track of faces. The beach was a chaos of shouting, wounded men, and orders screamed hoarse by officers who no longer cared if anyone listened. Reeves glanced inland. Beyond the bluffs, fields waited. France waited. Every minute the Germans delayed mattered. He didn't know it yet, but he was fighting not just the men in front of him, but the belief system of an entire enemy command. At German headquarters, belief outweighed evidence. Reports from Normandy were filtered through expectation. Every success the Allies achieved there was interpreted as a necessary illusion, just convincing enough to keep Germany guessing, just costly enough to feel real. The trap was elegant. The deception had not created confusion. It had created confidence. Confidence that Normandy was a trick. Confidence that patience would be rewarded. By late afternoon, Rommel was not in Normandy. He was in Germany, celebrating his wife's birthday. When word reached him, he rushed back, but hours had already slipped away. Hours when armor could have rolled. Hours when beaches could have been erased. Instead, the coastline hardened. Corporal Ernst Keller retreated through a village whose name he would later forget. Houses burned quietly. Civilians huddled in cellars. The war had finally arrived here, and it showed no sign of leaving. Keller stopped behind a cart, hands shaking as he reloaded. He had been told Normandy was safe. Quiet, secondary. He wondered who had decided that, and why they weren't here. As evening approached, Hitler remained fixed on Calais. He authorized limited movements, small adjustments, nothing decisive, nothing that would risk the real invasion force, which he still believed was coming. The Allied deception did not shout, it whispered. And Germany listened. When darkness returned, Normandy was no longer just a landing zone. It was a foothold. All because the enemy waited for a storm that never broke. Night fell again over Normandy, 12 hours after the first parachutes opened. The sky was bruised purple and black, the air thick with smoke and the low, constant rumble of engines moving inland. On a dirt road near Bayeux, Lieutenant Karl Weiss watched silhouettes pass him in the dark, Allied trucks, endless, loaded with men, ammunition, fuel, a river of logistics flowing straight off the beaches. He felt something cold settle in his chest. Diversions did not build supply lines. Inside a candlelit farmhouse, now serving as a German command post, radios crackled with frustration. Requests for armored support repeated again and again, each one climbing the chain of command, each one slowing as it rose. Permission was required. Confirmation was demanded. And confirmation never seemed complete enough. In Berlin, Hitler paced, refusing to commit the reserves. He believed the Allies were still playing their final card, that the real invasion fleet waited just out of sight, ready to strike Pas-de-Calais once Germany shifted its weight. The deception had become doctrine. Far from the coast, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel finally returned to France. His car raced through the night, headlights off, escorted by motorcycles. He listened to reports in grim silence. Beachheads intact, Allied armor ashore, air superiority total. Rommel understood immediately what others still resisted. This was the main effort. But understanding came too late. On the beaches, Sergeant Daniel Reeves sat with his back against a crate of ammunition, helmet pushed up, hands shaking as exhaustion set in. Around him, medics worked under dim lights. Engineers marked cleared paths through mines. Officers bent over maps, planning tomorrow as if today had not nearly broken them. Reeves looked out toward the sea. It was full. Ships as far as he could see. The Germans had not thrown them back, not in the hours when it might have been possible. Inland, Corporal Ernst Keller and what remained of his unit fell back again. They were no longer trying to stop the invasion, only to slow it. He passed a knocked-out tank, blackened and silent. It should have been here in the morning, dozens like it, hundreds. Instead, it lay alone, a symbol of absence. Keller felt anger now, sharp and bitter, not at the men advancing toward him, but at the waiting. The endless, fatal waiting. By midnight, the truth could no longer be denied. Normandy was not a feint, not a bluff. It was the invasion. Orders finally went out to move the armored divisions, but roads were clogged, bridges were destroyed. Allied aircraft hunted anything that moved by daylight. The window had closed. The hours that mattered most were gone forever. The deception had not defeated Germany with bombs or bullets. It had defeated Germany with time. And time, once lost, does not return. Morning returned to Normandy slowly, pale light spilling over fields scarred by tracks and shell holes. June 7th, 1944. The second day of an invasion that should never have survived its first. Along the coast, the beaches no longer looked like targets. They looked like ports. Steel roadways stretched into the surf. Cranes swung. Ships unloaded in steady rhythm. The chaos of the landing had hardened into momentum. This was the moment Germany had been trying to prevent, and it had already passed. In a battered orchard outside a small Norman village, Corporal Ernst Keller sat with his back against a tree, helmet beside him, eyes hollow. He listened as Allied artillery rolled forward, the sound constant now, almost mechanical. This was no longer about stopping the enemy. It was about enduring them. Keller thought of Calais, of the divisions that had waited there, engines warm, crews ready. He imagined them still standing by the sea, staring across empty water. The thought made his stomach twist. In Allied headquarters, the mood was cautious but changing. Officers spoke in low voices, aware that nothing was guaranteed yet, but something fundamental had shifted. They had survived the vulnerable hours, the window when everything could have collapsed. The deception had done its job, not because the Germans were foolish, but because they were logical. The lie had fit their expectations too perfectly. Sergeant Daniel Reeves walked inland with his unit as the front line crept forward. He passed German prisoners, sitting quietly along the roadside. Young men, old men, faces smeared with dust and disbelief. None of them looked surprised that the Allies had landed, only that it had worked. Reeves didn't think about strategy or deception. He thought about the men who had died on the beach and the fact that their sacrifice hadn't been wasted. That mattered. In Berlin, maps were updated, arrows redrawn, but the truth could no longer be erased. The invasion had taken hold. The delay, the hesitation born from certainty, had sealed Germany's fate in the West. The deception known as Operation Fortitude had not won the war by itself, but it had protected the moment when everything was most fragile, when a single decision made hours earlier might have changed history. The Bluff was never meant to last forever, only long enough. And it did, because while Germany waited for the wrong storm, the real one broke over Normandy and never lifted.